to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Every other part.
Thank you. Please be seated. Now, would you please welcome the President of the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, retired Army Colonel Bill Butler.
Well, thank you, everybody. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our CEO, Dr. Frederick Bertley, our volunteers, our staff, just want to welcome everybody here to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum for our Salute Women in Their Service event. And thanks to Councilmember Nancy Day-Achauer. She was the brainchild behind this, wanted to do it last year, and came back to us again this year to offer this event. And so we're super excited to have everybody here, to have Kathy and hear her remarks. So just a little bit about the museum, because I see some unfamiliar faces I haven't seen before. So the mission of the NVMM is to honor all veterans, elevate their stories, and amplify the power of service for everyone everywhere. We want people to come into the museum, see and hear the example that veterans have set by their service in the military and then the service after they take the uniform off. They become a veteran. They continue to serve their community, their schools, their neighborhoods, they volunteer, they set an example, and we want that example to inspire others to serve their own schools, communities, churches, synagogues in their own way. So we're excited to be able to have that inspiration here at the museum and to use the veterans as that voice. So part of that service in action is through nooks that we have at the library. So we've got those at three of the library branches in the main branch. We've got one downstairs. We'll be opening one at the Martin Luther King branch here in a couple of weeks. And then this summer, we should have a pop-up nook at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And then the other important part of the museum is everybody's got a story of service. You may have only served for 2 years. You may have served for closer to 40 years. Those stories are important. And we want everybody to share their stories and have them reside here at the museum, at a national museum, but then we also send them to the Library of Congress so that they become part of our nation's history by you being willing and open to share your story. So we encourage everybody to do that. One of the regrets that I have in my life is that I never asked my grandfathers much about their military service in World War II. And they died many years ago, and sadly, their stories died with them. And I know one of them had an incredible story, was a POW for a very short period of time in Italy, escaped. He was a 31-year-old infantryman. He was on the first wave of the amphibious assault in Salerno Beach in Italy during World War II. And that's about all I know of his service. The other one served in the Pacific as an Army Air Corps airman. That's all I know about his service. So, for your families, record your stories so they don't have that regret for not having asked. So would encourage everybody to do that. We're super excited for tonight's event, and we're going to hear from some amazing women who've served our country so admirably and honorably. So thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Columbus City Councilmember Nancy Day-Achauer, and on behalf of City Council, we welcome you to this joint event with NVMM. The Columbus City Council likes to honor women during Women's History Month, and so several of us have events. One of my colleagues, Councilmember Lourdes Barroso de Padilla, is in the back there. I introduced her just as she put food in her mouth. We have these events to celebrate women, and so last year I thought that I wanted to have an event that celebrated women veterans because their stories are often not told, their service has often been overlooked, and I wanted to change that by creating something where the City of Columbus could celebrate women. And so I approached MVMM with my, at that time, half-baked idea about what to do, and collectively we came together and created Saluting Women Who Serve. Last year was our first event, and it was a small, intimate event only for women veterans so that they could share their stories. But this year we wanted to do something different and invite the general public to come and hear stories from amazing female veterans. So thank you so much for being here this evening. How many of you out there are veterans? Please raise your hand. Oh, amazing, amazing. Near the end of the event, we're going to have an opportunity for people to get up and network and share their stories, because as Bill Butler mentioned, that's a big part of what the museum promotes is share the stories. So be prepared that near the end, you all get to talk and share your stories. But first, we get to hear an amazing story from a female veteran who has done incredible things. I feel like such a slacker next to her. Let's see, oceanography, she has a degree in oceanography. She's a Navy veteran. She's an astronaut. She's the past president and CEO of COSI across the street. Amazing legacy of work that she has done, and we are so lucky to have her here this evening to share her story. After she speaks, we'll have a Q&A time here so you can ask her some stories, ask her for some more stories about her service. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kathryn Sullivan.
Well, I have to open by asking you the same question that Nancy did, because I want to know how many women veterans are in the room. So if you're a veteran, please raise your hand again. This is great. Selfishly, how many Navy veterans? All right. Not that we don't love our fellow branches of the service, but Well, I'm really delighted to be here to share this evening with you all and have a chance to share with you some of the perspectives, some of the lessons, some of the insights that I've gained along a very windy, not at all linear career path that has taken me through many different forms of leadership. And I was talking to the young man over here who's filming for NBC4, and we were talking about, well, what's important here? To me, at the root, what's most important here is the notion of service. And we're talking tonight about service in military uniform. But if you look at this community, think about all the roles in which people are serving the public in this community to make our place, our community, our world a better place. So I have a maybe wider slice of types of service than others, but the world of service that I hope we all remember to honor whenever we can is even broader than I could speak to tonight. So From my young days, and I'll roll the tape back and sort of wind it forward for you, service has really been the through line in my career. That's been the purpose and service of the things I've always been motivated to pursue. But the nature of that service and the arena in which I was practicing it have changed multiple times, and I've been reminded by my irreverent friends, usually wildly changing, and what were you thinking of? From one thing to another, quite different. But my capacity as a leader, my skills as a leader, and my insight about how to best lead different groups of people in different challenges, that has grown at every step of the way, hopefully at least enough to keep me up to the challenge. So once upon a time, way back when, we're not going to talk about how many decades this was, I was just a little girl in Southern California who dreamt of exploring. But as a young girl in the late 50s, early 60s, exploring was not typically what girls and women did. There were no role models who looked like me to take notes from. But there were plenty of role models out there to take notes from. If I was focused on what does courage look like? What does mastery look like? What does planning look like? What does resilience and adaptability look like? Because you can see those in any person, whether they look a lot like you or not. So it didn't bother me that all the early astronauts were men. It really didn't bother me. I didn't see any women there. It honestly never occurred to me that that didn't mean I couldn't be there. It didn't bother me that Jacques Cousteau and his whole crew was men. What I focused on was the adventures they were having, trying altogether new things, creating the means and the tools to do those new things, and mastering them. So my first explorations really were all about finding some path in 1960s, early 1970s America, where a young girl could move into some of those kinds of adventures and explorations. Now, adults in my world back then would say that they saw me as a leader from an early day, and very early age. But let me tell you, it took me a lot longer than they got. They got there faster than I did. It took me a lot longer to really see myself as a leader, and even more importantly, to learn how to act, how to behave myself, comport myself, and how to act to exercise the authority of a leader. In fact, through my school years, all the way through my PhD, the essence of my job was to be an independent agent, adding more knowledge to my mind and more tools to my intellectual and physical toolkit. You're really only responsible for my growth and development and the kind of work that I could do. But still, I started to collect some early insights about leadership, what it means and how different people exercise it. I spent a lot of time at sea and a lot of time in remote field camps during my undergraduate and graduate years. So I could watch captains of ships, the chief bosun's mate, the head of the scientific party, all those different groups had to work together pretty seamlessly to make the expedition deliver the results that we were after. Sometimes it worked very well. Sometimes you saw grace and respect and really constructive engagement. Sometimes it was bumpier. Sometimes you saw personalities and tantrums and egos get into the mix. So it comes in all flavors, but I had a great chance to start noticing the different varieties and different behaviors, and to start thinking about the kind of, which ones did I want to collect? If grad school was a big leap, straight out of grad school into NASA as an astronaut was a gigantic leap. I was a great whopping 26 years old, and as I look back at those years, which I had to do to write my book, Handprints on Hubble, went back through all my early notes, and it was a really painful thing to do because I was chagrined, deeply embarrassed, astonished at how totally, utterly clueless I had been about how to operate in a big organization and about where is power and authority vested in a large organization. How is it exercised in that organization? And if you're young and starting out and coming up the ranks, how do you deal with that? How do you engage with it effectively to develop your skills and move forward? Really crazy embarrassing. But the astronaut role will teach you right out of the blocks a lot about leadership. I mean, you're the kids with the fancy blue flight suit and the cool title. Everyone looks up to astronauts. You're going to get to go fly in space. You have immense responsibility for the success of the mission, and not just a little bit for your life and the lives of your crewmates. But you actually have zero formal control or authority over anybody else. You don't sign anybody's performance appraisal. Nobody reports to you. You don't sign off on anybody's paycheck. So the quandary is you can't succeed in that role if you're not authoritative. But you don't have any of the conventional mechanical tools and hooks and gadgets that people rely on to show their authority. The only way for you to succeed in that role is to be a genuine leader, to demonstrate mastery of your responsibilities and the things that adhere to your role, to move people forward and bring people together by powers of persuasion, to help solve arguments by clarity of thinking and force of argument, because everyone's in it on really the same basis. And it was those years starting to figure that out and learn the ropes myself that I adopted a conscious leadership practice, really my very first conscious leadership practice. And I was watching people around me, astronauts who were more senior to me, the engineers and leaders of the Johnson Space Center and sometimes NASA headquarters, and keeping a mental two-column list. In one column, I would note the behaviors, the modes, the techniques of someone I really admired. This was a, if I'm ever leading something, I want to do it this way column. And this column, of course, was, if I'm ever leading something, I am never, ever going to do it that way. And I got to tell you, probably in any organization, you're likely to put more entries into this column than into that column. But I think that was a good discipline for me to note, and I really did start to take things to heart about the ways I saw certain people leading that, A, I could tell were the ones under which I thrived the best, but also that seemed to draw the best out of the most people around them and seemed to most facilitate bringing multiple people from different parts of the organization together to a common focus around the success of the mission. The leaders I most admired and the ones I thrived under, with fancy military titles and astronaut to their name, they were still not about themselves. They were actually quite modest in their bearing. They always showed respect to everybody else, no matter how junior or less informed or more ignorant they were. Their standards and expectations, don't get me wrong, were super, super high. They could be sharp or harsh or direct, bluntly direct when need be. But treating everyone with respect made a big difference and a big impact on me. Another thing I noticed, and this is why I was working as support crew for the 2 astronauts who were going to fly the very second space shuttle flight. So really, most of us still had a lot to learn about the space shuttle. Dick Truly was going to be the number 2 on that flight. He came in through the military orbiting lab program, had not yet flown in space. Joe Engle was going to be the commander. Joe Engle earned his astronaut wings flying X-15s when I was a little girl watching all that out at Edwards Air Force Base. So he kind of already was an astronaut. This was going to be his first flight in space. And we'd have meetings to review all the information that was coming their way, the content of their checklists and so on. And they would ask questions that would absolutely shock me, because I had read the Space Shuttle 101 workbook. And I felt, well, I think I know that answer, and here's this guy asking that question. I think I would have been mortified to ask that question around my peers. They probably would have laughed me out of the room. Don't you know that yet? But Dick and Joe asked those questions over and over again. They were surrounded by people that might have spotted a nuance they hadn't, that might have a different angle on the problem that they hadn't spotted yet. And I think also they wanted to make sure they were conveying to all of us, doesn't matter if I'm senior to you or been on a flight before you, you know some things, you bring some skills that this mission needs. And I want to make sure they're on the table. They were interested in developing and actively worked on developing the younger talents around them. These are my first 2 proof points that you can have outstanding top caliber servant leadership, even in a no kidding, high stakes, hardcore environment. It doesn't have to be punch them and kick them. It doesn't have to be challenge and stress them until they're bending. It actually can be grow them from within. They were proof points for me on that. Around 10 years into my NASA career, I decided to join the Navy Reserve, another one of those, what in the hell was she, whoops, what the heck, I know I said it right the first time, what the hell was she thinking? And my reasoning was pretty simple. I mean, I really grew up in the maritime services as an oceanographer. I loved going out to sea, still do. I currently had the coolest ops job in the universe, astronaut. But I knew the day would come when I had to move beyond that ops job. And Navy oceanography was a really pretty good second place for me. Ships at sea doing practical work that helps our naval forces succeed. And it would maintain a connection to the maritime culture and going out to sea on a sort of periodic basis that reserve careers let you do. So now I'm a naval officer. I was direct commissioned as a lieutenant commander. That's 04 for you guys who wear green. And so now people will do whatever I say because I have stripes on my sleeve. But I am an absolutely brand new naval officer. Absolutely brand new. And I have sailors under my command who know a boatload more than I do. And so the question I had to figure out was, how do you handle that? And luckily, a very wise senior colleague said, this is what you need to understand. The most important and valuable sentence in a young naval officer's vocabulary. Do you know what that is? I said, no, sir, I don't. It is, well, Chief, what do I think about this? That 15 or 20-year veteran has got it figured out. He or she knows really what would be the wisest thing for you to order them to do. Respect that expertise. Show them that respect. And show that little bit of humility to put yourself in that position of asking the question. Again, it's another one of the ways to make sure that you are drawing effectively on all the talents of the entire team around you, that you're not blinded by stripes on a sleeve or the path that they're on. And then COSI was, again, an altogether new challenge that forced incredible leaps of learning. It, in a lot of ways, was second maybe only to astronaut is the hardest job I've ever had. Now I had to lead through transformative growth. I had to work with a governing board. I'd never done that, and had to engage a community effectively. This shift really drove home to me, if everything else before hadn't, that no matter what organization you're leading, no matter what part of it you're in charge of, and no matter what your field of endeavor, leading is all about, leading any organization, any function is about leading people. That's the essence of all of them. There may be technology, there may be operations involved, but you as leader have to be focused on leading people. So one of the challenges at COSI, 30-some year history over on East Broad Street, going to move to this new site, the building wasn't built yet. You know, human beings don't like to leave someplace they know that they're comfortable in and proud of until they could see what's next. We hang on to what we got. It's the basic human instinct for security. I know this works, and I'm safe and happy with this, however flawed or failing it might be, and I ain't letting go till I can see the next handhold. And it falls to the CEO or the leader in a military unit to paint that picture for them, to answer the questions they're really hungering for. Where are we going? Why do we have to go through all this change? And most importantly, how are we going to get there? I learned in figuring that all out through lots of people I talked to and sources I read. I found that I think the best way to handle leading amid great uncertainty is to stay very clear on ends and means. What are the ends we're pursuing? What are the goal or the purpose we're pursuing? What is that really? That's what we do. And what really rather few essential things must be true when we do that? Be very clear about that. Be the beacon that keeps that clear to all of your people. What about means? How are we going to do what you just said? Well, it's a fool's errand, I think, for anybody to think you can specify to all the people who are working for you every single little thing they should do or how exactly they should do it. I sure can't. So the technique I learned there through some board work was talk about the means, but your job as a leader, really the effective thing is tell them what means they are not allowed to use. So for example, just a metaphorical example, at the end, your assignment is put on a dinner party. For whatever reason, I have specified that it has to be round tables, you can't be any shellfish, and no hard liquor. Okay? So fast forward, This approach is going to leave latitude and it's going to require, in fact, creativity and adaptability on the part of the people you're working with. So let's go back to the dinner metaphor. If that dinner's a success and everyone had a grand time, but I utterly, totally hated the tablecloths and the room decor, I need to never say a word about that. My team made perfectly valid choices that were in bounds, not choices I would have made. And if I know you well enough, I might get you over a beer and say, seriously, neon green tablecloths? Or I might make a joke on myself. If I had known it was going to be neon green. But the minute you take them to task for those green tablecloths and those tacky room decorations, they're going to learn that they don't dare actually ever move unless you have told them what to do. That organization will now be single-threaded around you. It will only move with the speed or agility that you can process and tell people they can do. If you're a real leader, you don't want your organization functioning that way. You want it to be bigger than you, better than you. You want force multipliers around you. You want your people, your smart people out there spotting trends or issues or opportunities that in your busyness, in your just one job, you haven't seen yet. And you want them coming together and talking about that so the whole organization can seize those opportunities, duck those bullets, grapple those challenges effectively. That's a real-world example I can offer in that same vein. I started the Challenger Center education programs for June Scopy. This was a total blank sheet exercise. And a few years later, we had the first centers up and running, and there was a big push in the space circles for the United States and the Soviet Union to mount a joint manned mission to Mars. This would have been 1987. It was clear to me that the grown-ups are never going to do that. The politics and all that is going to get in the way. But we're running an organization aimed at inspiring and teaching young people. And so I went to the hired head of education at the time and said, the grown-ups are never going to do that, but there's no reason the kids can't. Let's do a mission to Mars. And he kept coming back to me and saying, well, what do you want to be like? Do you want me to aim at high school? Do you want me to aim here? Do you want me to aim here? What grade level? I said, you start working the community. You aim at whatever grade level draws the most classrooms and the most vibrant teacher interest. I'm not going to specify a grade level. We want impact on a large number of people. Well, how technical, how high-techy does it have to be? That's not my answer. You find that audience, you find that target group of teachers, it becomes what they need it to be to work in their classroom. As long as we launch this and engage a goodly number of students and leave them a good learning experience and some inspiration, that's success, and I don't care what the window dressing is. It gained designation as an International Space Year program. It touched hundreds of elementary schools across the country. Their spaceships were big plastic bubbles inflated with a room fan. And the other part of the exercise was, of course, designing their mission emblem and coming up with all the stories that were, to them, the meaning and purpose of that mission. Those kids will go far. They'll go somewhere far. They've had a taste of what that can be like. So, lots is written about whether leaders are born or made. And I think this is kind of like nature and nurture. The answer is both, but in different proportions for different people, and sometimes dependent on the path they took. A very senior NASA leader told me once that he said he thought people came in three shapes. He said there are horizontal people. They know a lot about it. They know a goodly bit about a wide array of things. And then there are I-shaped people. They know very, 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 very much about a fairly narrow range of things. And there's merit and value to being a flat-shaped or an I-shaped person. But he thought the optimum shape to be was T-shaped. You had mastered something. You knew what it took to really gain deep expertise. But you had not lost the lateral perspective. You could still see across seams and across boundaries and outside your fence. And I've come to believe that T-shaped people, T-shape is the best shape for a leader to be. To recognize and really salute and draw out the deep expertise within your team, but also to be alert to and responsive to and engaged with both the challenges and opportunities that exist within your organization across the seams and out in the world beyond you. That's what I tried to do the last time I was leading NOAA, was change their culture to that kind of mindset. Because in a politicized environment like that, someone who's working their issue, their arena over here, might get a bit of intel that helps all of the rest of us know how better to move forward. You want those conversations. You want that intel gathering. You want everybody to know they're part of painting the complete picture that we're all going to respond to. So whether you're at the start of your leadership journey, like our young cadets, and have they departed? They did a really seriously good job posting the colors. I think you'd all agree. But I hope, or you're older like me, I hope there's been a little bit of wisdom or maybe a few nuggets in my remarks tonight for you to take with you along the way. I would say, leave you with one little astronaut adage that might help sum up much of what I've said. We said this to ourselves very, 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 very frequently, and it sounds really ridiculously simple. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And that plays out at so many different scales and in so many different circumstances. Keep mission and purpose primary. Be crystal clear about the ends and means of a mission or a project. Recognize that the functioning of any organization needs constant tending. However clear your purpose, however brilliantly designed your structure is, however elegant your processes are, you pour people into all that, it gets messy and unstable. So as a leader, take some constant attention to make sure the oil gets dropped into the right gears and things keep moving. There's no perfect combination of structure and process when you throw people into the mix. And finally, remember that leadership is first and foremost about leading people. However big or small your title or your perks or whatever your line of business is, if you're leading people. So in short, as the bottom line, serve your mission and serve your people. You'll end up in a good place. Thank you. And there's a microphone in the middle of the room, or maybe it can go walkabout.
Good evening, Dr. Sullivan. I printed off, to prepare myself, I printed off a short bio of you, and it's only 14 pages long. I did have two questions. You actually answered one of them, and that is what motivated you after having become an astronaut and actually flown in space and then decide to join the military. I mean, I know it's not because of the cool suits, but it does.
I'd rather blue and stripes than some of the other suits, but.
The second part is that you also then served on some advisory boards and what have you at the federal level. And you were also an assistant secretary of commerce.
Undersecretary, actually.
Undersecretary. Kind of my point is that you're sort of, and I'm kind of going with that one movie about NASA, Hidden Figures. You were sort of a hidden figure in those positions. And I wanted to know what you thought about your ability to influence what it was you were trying to do in those positions. How much impact you felt you had.
I think it varied with my different roles and grew as I matured and learned better and better lessons. And to keep it short, I would offer 2 points that I take some pride in from my last assignments at NOAA, both as assistant secretary and undersecretary. When I went back to NOAA at President Obama's request, NOAA's $2 billion satellite program was basically in the ditch. It was technically off the rails, and politically it had lost the confidence of the Congress. The agency had lost the confidence of the Congress and our parent department, the Department of Commerce. By the time I was 2 years into my term as undersecretary, we had the program back on track technically. It was getting full budgeted, and we had managed to persuade the Congress not just to budget us to build one satellite at a time, which is the dumbest way in the universe to build satellites. You let all the engineering and all the talent go, and then 2 years later you go, oh wait, I need it again. So they would not give us any multi-program, multi-satellite funding because we'd compromised our credibility too badly. But by the time I left, we had funding for a block of 4 satellites. We could get the early lead parts. We could retain some of the talent and the key engineering talent in the companies that were building the satellites for us. So turning around the satellite programs, which required regaining credibility with the Secretary of Commerce, regaining credibility with the White House Budget Office, with multiple committees on the Hill, and then also doing the inside work of getting our team back into shape to where they were really on top of their game technically. So I think I count that as a success and take a lot of pride in that. And then finally, I left NOAA at the end of Obama's second term. My departure was not about election results. I was done being in DC. I was going to come home. But you might recall a fair bit of political turmoil at the start of the first Trump term. And one of my NASA senior leaders jotted me a personal email somewhere a few months into that and said, "Thank heavens you taught us to work the way you did, because this is how we're getting through this turmoil together." They'd managed to move them from rice bowls and leaking things to the Congress, everybody playing their own cards and not worried about the greater good of the whole mission. And they had moved strongly in the opposite direction and were doing a lot better to advance the entire mission, not just play for their own ball.
Dr. Sullivan, you talked a little bit about developing T-shaped leaders and developing curiosity. You kind of lead in that direction. What are some of your best practices for developing T-shaped leaders as I go into my second hour?
You know, for me and for a number of the leaders that I've most admired, you can't beat reading. A colleague I've worked with for a number of years, now retired 4-star Admiral Jim Stavridis. Jim was staff to me on a Navy commission many hundred years ago when he was Lieutenant Commander Stavridis. And he's kept a leader's bookshelf. And it's not just, you know, a head full speed, left full rudder, head flank speed. It's more about how did leaders behave, good, bad, or otherwise, out in tough conditions. It's presidential leaders, it's business leaders. Again, I commented that I was able to take notes that tuned me up and inspired me quite a lot from people who didn't look like me. You can take leadership notes from people. We're all encountering roughly the same challenges. But the way someone in HR in a corporate setting dealt with that challenge, and someone in the Army as a field officer, or someone in an agency of the civil service government, you get different insights about ways to handle it that you might not have seen with just your blinders on. So I encourage people to read voraciously. Novels can certainly help. Novels are a great way to show how history and culture and personalities interact in settings a creative novelist can make up that never happened in the real world. But I'm a huge fan of biography as well. It also helps to be a wanderer like me.
Most surprising thing about being on a spacewalk, most surprising thing about being in the Mariana Trench.
Oh. Well, the whole point of your training as an astronaut is that nothing is too surprising. You want there to be some surprises, but you don't want it to be any big ones. So the one thing that NASA has never found a way to train you completely for, and if they ever found it, I would find the recipe and burn it up, because this is the one thing you don't want to be completely prepared for, is how breathtaking your first view of Earth will be from a spacecraft window, and how fun zero gravity is going to be. So, give us enough smarts to know how, but not too much. We had one really surprising thing. Ours was a very short spacewalk, actually. It was about 3.5 hours, and it was quite busy. So we did not have a lot of look-around time. You can get look-around time on a longer spacewalk if you've positioned yourself here and you have to wait for your other buddy to get there. Then you can afford to distract yourself for a moment and take a look around. We didn't have much of that on our spacewalk. But silly little story, there was a little bracket on a tool that we were using that you would rotate out of our way and do the work we needed to do and then rotate it back. And every time we trained on the ground, that's exactly how it behaved. You move it out of the way, and perfect. But it behaved that way on Earth because the weight of the bracket put a little bit of friction into the hinge. So when you put it somewhere, it stayed. There wasn't any friction. in zero gravity. So Dave was the guy doing this at the time, and he moves it away, and it drifts away, and it bounces off the surface of the instrument we were working on, and it drifts back to his hand, and it bounces off his hand. And so we're just watching this little bracket waft back and forth, slowly and gently. It was just an amusement, but we're like, I never even thought about that. That's the kind of surprise you want. Bottom of the Marianas Trench, I'd read a good bit of scientific literature and seen some of the soda straw little pictures that remote instruments had brought back up, but to actually see that moonscape with your own eyes, and you can't, see across Front Street. You can see maybe to the second row of these chairs with the lights that you brought down, but still to get a 3D textured, colored view of that environment sort of helped. It's kind of like it crystallized. It gave me a scaffold, I guess, on which I could hang so much of the other small research papers I'd read over the years.
We have time for one more question.
These guys are all chickens. Someone wants to ask how you go to the bathroom.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. It sounds like you had great leaders that wanted to mentor you throughout your career, that saw you. What advice would you give to someone that has the opposite kind of leadership?
Yeah, I had some encounters with the opposite kind of leadership, but I never, mentorship has become a whole different thing recently. I never had a mentor, like, I've agreed to be your mentor. Would you agree to be my mentor? And do we have office hours at 10 o'clock on Tuesday? That never existed in my world. But I had, nonetheless, lots of mentors, because I think I was able to take notes. I took notes from everyone and about everyone around me. So there are countless little mini moments of mentorship as you go through your world. I mean, I think my 2-column list that I made up was people mentoring me in different ways by what they showed me, by what they modeled, and by the fact that I paid attention and made note of it and wrote it down. That's it's not very verbal mentoring, but that's a bit of mentoring. So if you've got the person that doesn't think so highly of you or doesn't think people like you should be there, I think the first and foremost thing to fall back on is embarrass them into submission by proof of your work. That's one fundamental tool. Some of them still won't give up. Some of them are just dug in. Find yourself a new place is sometimes what it takes. Find an ally, sometimes what it takes. Someone who, when you've had a real run-in with that person and you're just down in the dumps, find the friend that'll pick you up off the ground and pat you up and pat you on the head, give you a beer, go home and throw something against the wall, and then saddle up and come back in tomorrow and give it another try. Persistence, mastery, there's no way around those. They're not always enough to get you through a wicket like that. They're really going to chicken out. Okay. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for those very inspiring remarks on not only your service and your storied career, but just leadership at large. We just really appreciate your time with us this evening. My name is Marnie Holder. I'm Vice President of Advancement here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum. I did not wear the uniform myself, but I was military spouse for 25 years, Army, not Navy, sorry. But I also worked for the Army as a civilian for 22 of those years. So service is near and dear to my heart, and being in a room full of those of you who have served and worn the cloth of our nation, I applaud you, and you inspire me. Tonight we gather to honor women who have served, but also to recognize something deeper, the power of service itself. Service is not defined by a uniform alone. It's defined by a commitment to something greater than oneself, as we saw here with Dr. Sullivan. For too long, the stories of women in service have been underrepresented, overlooked, and told through someone else's lens. When stories are missing, understanding is missing. When understanding is missing, connection is lost. The most powerful way to understand service is to hear it directly, personally, and authentically from those who have lived it. What you're about to see is one of those stories. Army veteran Terry Swank shares her journey not just of service, but of identity, resilience, and purpose. As you watch, I invite you to listen beyond the details of her experience and hear the deeper truth of what it means to be part of something bigger than oneself.
So I joined in 1979, a week after high school. Wanted to go to school, become a nurse. Didn't have the means to do that, so I joined the military. I trained as a medic, and I was selected to join the AGR force, which is Active Guard and Reserve. I'm working at the Armory as a unit clerk, as a training NCO, also as a platoon sergeant, over time. I went back to school 15 years later, thinking I'm going to go to nursing school. And one day in class, there's this other classmate, talking about this thing called a PA. Find out the military has a program. It's called IPAP, Inter-Service Physician Assistant Program. I was accepted into IPAP. So to be selected to the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame was amazing. It was such an honor. I was very humbled, excited, being inducted into the Hall of Fame. My focus is giving back to veterans, to relate to them and to talk to them and hear their stories. It's important to capture not only the men in their military stories, but also the women and our role that we play. We all have our piece, our part in the military. So if you think that your military service is insignificant, well, I just did this and I was just doing my job. It just doesn't matter, because you're all a piece of that military service, and your service matters, and you're part of the American history. So it's important to capture those stories and that history of those experiences.
As our president, Bill Butler, mentioned earlier, we're a storytelling museum. We capture stories like Terry Swank, we capture stories like Dr. Sullivan, and we want to capture your stories. So I invite you to scan this QR code or visit our front desk. We would love to record those stories and make you a part of this museum, and all those stories will be captured in the Library of Congress. And to invite our next exercise, I will introduce Nancy again, who our host of the evening. And thanks to the city for even creating moments like this where we get to celebrate women who serve.
So as Marnie and Bill mentioned, storytelling, that's what it's all about here at the museum. And so we would like to create an opportunity for those of you who have served to share your stories by simple networking. Do we have little questions up there? Those of you who are veterans, we would love to have those around who are not veterans hear your story. We'd love to have those of you who are veterans share your stories with one another. And so those of you who are veterans and aren't too shy, if you could stand up so people can kind of see who you are. Come on, you served, you can handle this. Look around you folks at all these people who have served. So please get up, walk around, spot these people. And if you don't know what to say or what to ask, we've got some prompters here. How did you serve? Can be a great starter there. So please get up and take this opportunity to share stories. If we have anybody there who has mobility challenges, maybe those of you who veterans could like to go over there and just chat with somebody who's not able to get up and move around. But please, let's take this time to share your stories.